All righty, welcome to a breaking news break. I guess you would call it, Josh.
A breaking news break.
A breaking
Yes.
news break here on a Monday afternoon on April 28th, 2025. Josh, you were in court today.
I was in court all day today. Yes, got there at 9 o'clock. It is now, what time is it? 3:42. We actually adjourned about 2:20, and we had court. It was
This
the
is breaking news.
city versus the county. We started at 9 o'clock this morning with. Initially, there were a series of motions that we thought might take some time, which was, just the back and forth motions before they started, as far as what evidence could be admitted, not admitted, whatnot. Man, the judge blew through that in like 60 seconds. And basically it was, his point was he would rule on it as he got to it. So he didn't want to dig through a bunch of motions at the end. Actually, he said he'd sent a ruling on the motions and somehow his email didn't get through. Nobody got it on either side. So so he dove right in with the city case, which was a single witness. It was Council Member Henry Feldhaus, and he got on the stand about 9 o'clock this morning and wrapped up about, I want to say it was about 11:15. He got done, so about 2 hours of testimony from Council Member Feldhaus. Learned a lot of background on him I did not know before. Which is basically between him and his family. They've been in county government, I think, going back to the 1600s or something.
Exactly,
it was a long time back.
Before the Declaration of Independence was signed.
I think so. We may not have
Henry
even
was
been
there.
a country.
Henry was there.
Yeah. They went back a long time. His father served, if I've got this right, I believe he was a county commissioner. And I think I got that right. And maybe his mom was on the school board. So that was important because they were in those positions at the time that this sales tax agreement was signed back in 1974. Right. So obviously no one that was involved in the actual agreement is alive anymore. So Councilmember Feldhaus is the last person that is alive that was involved at least somewhat during that time. He was in the school system at that time, and then obviously his parents were involved in the actual decisions. And then he's been, either our city mayor or sitting on city council going back a number of years. So his testimony was basically to the effect that they relinquished this money, the sales tax revenue, back in 1974. But from what his recollection was from the city side of things, their idea was it was to pay off a building program at the time, which was $10.6 million. To do with the fact that the city schools were in major disrepair. I think he said there was one school, there was water running down the hallways if it rained too hard outside. So his recollection was that the agreement was meant to pay off that school debt, that $10.6 million, which has long since been paid back. That was paid back in the 1990s, I believe. So that was paid 20 years after that fact. He also testified to the fact that since going back to the 1990s, the city has attempted to reach out to the county and renegotiate the sales tax agreement and never had any success. They went through all these different letters, resolutions, ordinances that the city council had passed trying to get some kind of a renegotiation of the sales tax agreement, and none of that ever happened, which led us to today, which is 50 plus years later, being in front of a judge and having a lawsuit. So that was his side of it. From the county side, so we took a quick break after Councilmember Feldhaus, a big 15-minute break, and immediately went into the county's case, which the county had a single witness. That was Mayor Chad Graham. And his testimony, obviously, he wasn't around in the 1970s, and his parents didn't go back to, the Pilgrims or anything. So all he testified to was the language of the contract and the fact that the county continues to spend money on education and on building projects within the county with this money. So that was kind of the crux of his.
Well, I'll say this, Josh. There's a lot of people still alive that were present at that time.
Right.
I'm one of them. Okay. I was in school.
You were around in the 1970s.
And there's a lot of people my age and their parents that are still alive that remember this.
Yeah.
And I remember the city schools being handed over to the county and county system we had. We had a very similar program to what Tullahoma has now. They have Tullahoma City and they have Coffee County.
Yeah.
All right, we had Bedford County and we had Shelbyville City Schools. All right, so there's a lot of truth to that water running through the floor of the school.
Yeah.
Because that was at Central High School, there was lots of issues, and at the old Harris Middle School, which is now around the curve on Elm Street, there were issues there. That's where the water was running in.
Yeah.
Yes, there were issues with it, but the city basically just wanted out of the school system business. Okay,
Right.
They wanted that off of them, and it took a lot of money to run a school system. You know what it takes now.
Oh, yeah.
Just from the city standpoint, they still got money from the state back then, just like the county does. Yeah. But there was a huge responsibility in the upkeep and the maintenance on the buildings. They just handed it over basically at that point, and it was implied that we're not going to get back in the school business.
Yeah.
And
going forward, the county has had those schools
right,
and
that's why we relinquished the tax money.
Yeah,
because we're not going to get back into it. You take it.
correct. Yeah,
It's like a hot potato.
It was a little bit of a hot potato.
It's cooled off a little since then.
Well, it has, and now, as you and I have discussed in the past, and was discussed in court as well, the bulk of the funding now for the school system doesn't come from the city or the county.
Right.
It comes from the state and the federal.
Right.
Yeah, we're only covering
17%.
Of the amount. So, as far as what it's actually going to come down to, it seems like, this really ended up being a contract law kind of debate, and the debate ended up kind of centering around the word relinquish. So in the actual document that ended up getting signed, it said that the city relinquishes their portion of the sales tax to the county, and then it listed a series of conditions. All of those conditions have been met at this point, including the paying off that school bond, and there was some lease stuff and some other things, except for it all. One of those conditions was that the county continue to, spend money for school expenses.
And I believe they do.
Which they still do. They still do spend money on school expenses.
All right. There's a question here from Mr. Benji Burris.
Yep.
He's asked Josh why he said he voted no to bring the lawsuit in the first place.
Okay. Yep. That's a good question.
All right.
Yeah. I voted no, particularly because I felt like this should have been, and I think we talked about it on the show at the time, should have been negotiated rather than going to the court case. I think we've spent a ton of money on lawyers on this. Now, I will say, having sat through the court case now, it seems like there was a lot of attempts at negotiation that never went anywhere.
Right.
But I still think that ultimately the fact that we've had to drag this into millions of dollars of lawyers' fees, or over $1 million, I think, so is not the direction I would hope we would have gone. I would have hoped there would have been some kind of a political way to fix this.
There would have been, probably.
At the polls, somehow that we could have got our heads together and got this fixed without dragging a.
Yeah, because if you live in the city, you live in the county.
Right.
And there's a lot of people that want to separate the two. But if you live in the city limits of Shelbyville, you live in Bedford County. So you're basically suing yourself.
Yeah. So we're paying for both sides. People that live in the city are paying for both sides of lawyers. As far as where the funding is at now, there was a statement made during.
He back up.
Yep.
Why Henry did? Why he says?
Okay.
Why he voted no? Why
Henry voted no.
Right.
He said it was a political decision based on the fact that he was up for election at that point. So that's why he voted no at the time.
That's the reason he's been in office since the signing of the Declaration of Independence.
He goes back a couple of years. So yes, he does. Right. So yes, he does.
Sorry about that, Benji. I thought, but Josh did say no.
Yeah, I voted no on I've only had one chance to vote on this. That was very recently. That was on the funding to continue the case as it was.
Right.
So that was why I voted no at that point. There was a statement made during the trial I wanted to mention. It was, I believe, by Mayor Graham. It was just kind of a side statement he made to the fact that the city doesn't want to fund education. I want to be clear on how the funding is working right now, and also how we feel like it should work from the city side of things. And I think a lot of people at county would agree. First, the funding that does come local, which is property tax money. Half of the county property tax money comes from people living inside the city.
Exactly. Yeah, the city is funding.
So the city is funding education through their property taxes. In addition to that, By state law, already half of sales tax revenue that's generated in the city goes to the school system.
Right.
So the discussion here is not for the city to not fund their half of education, which they're going to continue to do regardless of how this works out. It's on a narrow, currently just on the sales tax side, not on the property tax, just on sales tax, 64% of sales tax generated inside the city is going to schools, leaving 36%
For the city.
For the city. The argument is just over that little 14% piece.
You're talking about trimming that 14% off back to
50%,
50%, right.
which is what it is by state.
Right. And that
statute.
equals to what? 1.3 or 4 million a year on
it's
average.
The number that was mentioned during the case was $2 million a year, roughly, give or take. So the city we would still be contributing half of all sales tax revenue, not to mention the fact that half of all property tax revenue comes from the city.
And I think there's a misconception that half y'all want all of it.
No,
and
it's
not that. It's not the way. It's basically that 14%
piece. Right. Yeah, which is what was tied up in this agreement going back to 1974. Now, a couple of side notes on this. I learned a few more things during the case today that I didn't know. There originally was, if you go back on the dates, October 8th of 1974 was the first, I guess, ordinance that the city passed as far as the agreement that they would sign with the county. So on October 8th, which was a standard, if you go back on the calendar, I believe it was a Tuesday, they put forth an agreement that had an end date. It had in that language a 20-year end date or until the bonds were paid off. October 10th, so go forward 2 days, which is, if you look on a very old calendar, I believe it came up to be a Thursday, there was a school board meeting, and the school board pushed back and said, we don't want to have an end date on this contract. They, at the time, didn't know if they could pay the bonds off in 20 years or if they would need to do a 30-year bond or whatever. So they pushed back to the city. So the final offer from the city that came out on October 12th. The thing about October 12th, if you look at that,
that's Saturday.
That's a Saturday. They had a Saturday meeting of the city council. There's no mathematical way that they could have given proper public notice for that meeting based on just in 1974. There was no Facebook or website.
No.
So there was no
a Times Gazette newspaper.
There was a Times Gazette. Yeah. So maybe there was something in the paper like a day or two before. But I bet if you went back and looked at the rules for city council back then, you had to give more than 1 or 2 days notice for a meeting. So they had a meeting on a Saturday where they passed what ended up being the final language.
So technically, on a technicality, that was null and void.
Yeah, and that did not get argued at court or anything. I actually pulled up my calendar and looked at that because I'd heard that there was a Saturday meeting somewhere, and I looked, and that was so the one that they kept discussing today in court, which happened on October 12th, happened on a Saturday. So city council got together on a Saturday and made a decision that here now, 50 plus years later, we're discussing in court, back and forth between the city and the county. So,
bottom line, what's your gut feeling on this?
I wish I had one. I honestly don't. I think it could go either way. It's really coming down to that contract law, and I'm not a lawyer, and I definitely don't play one on TV. So what is going to happen, just in the reason we came on the air now, just to let people know, the court case is done. Everything is, the judge has all the information he's going to get. He told us at the end of the court hearing that he will issue a ruling within 30 days.
Within 30 days. It could be next week as far as that goes.
He said the next 2 weeks he has some kind of a big opportunity, as it were. I believe a large trial going on for the next 2 weeks. So it's very unlikely he would rule any time in that because he'll be tied up for the next couple of weeks. But he did say, he did promise within the next 30 days there'll be a ruling. That ruling will get, we're in the modern age. He's not going to mail anymore. He's going to email it. So he'll email it, and then we'll know what the outcome is.
Here's my take on it. I feel like the city really doesn't have a case, but have pursued it because of that sequence that you just went through.
Yeah.
And I don't think they did their contracts right on the front end, and I feel like the ruling's going to come back in favor of the county. But the thing about that, nobody wins, Josh. Nobody wins.
No, lawyers won. Lawyers did good.
Nobody wins because if the city doesn't get this, I see a property tax increase coming. And if the county doesn't win this, I see a property tax increase coming in to make up the difference.
Somebody's
going to increase something. So if you're
Yeah.
sitting in the city limits of Shelbyville, you're probably going to get whammied either way.
Somebody's
All
going
right?
to hit you for taxes
Exactly.
at some point.
So half of us that are sitting in this county are going to be losers, one way or the other. That's kind of how I see it. I might be wrong. Who knows? Maybe the city wins the case and the county doesn't go up on property taxes, or maybe the county wins it and the city doesn't. I don't know, but I have a sneaking suspicion there's going to be a property tax increase coming somewhere.
You can almost always bet there's a tax increase coming down the road.
I smell it coming, Josh.
Yeah. So that's it in a nutshell. We just we wanted to go on the air because rather than wait till Saturday and talk about it, since the only people in the room were obviously the lawyers and the people that work at the court, and then there was a handful of us from city government, and then there's a handful from county government. But there was no, obviously, this doesn't go on court TV. Anything that happens in a courtroom here, and so there would be no other coverage otherwise. I could have written something about it, but I thought I'd just come hang out.
Yeah,
with
might
you
as well
about
come
it.
and talk about it, man. We can discuss it that way.
Yeah,
and it's a lot better to listen to it than it is to read it.
Well, reading's okay too.
Yeah, it's reading okay.
Yeah.
Well, thanks for watching, everybody. We just wanted to give everybody an update on what's going on with this lawsuit. It's finally come to the end. Now we wait on the judge.
Now we're waiting on the judge, so we'll know within the next 30 days.
All righty. We'll be back again on Saturday for the weekend wrap up, unless we have further developments or other breaking news. And I just encourage you to stay tuned. Bo and I will be coming on with a real talk show in just a few minutes.
All right.
We've got some topics to discuss today, but just hang around and we'll be back in a little while. Thanks for watching.